And we are recording now. I'll drag that out of the way. Now, if you do have a question while I'm speaking that you feel is urgent, you'd like asked, just type something down in the chat window. I've gotten reasonably good at checking that while I'm yapping. So, you know, I think I can probably walk and chew gum at the same time, maybe. Now, we don't have live sessions every week, but we do the first week to get everybody up and running. There's always a lot of miscellaneous admin and everything else you'd like to get out of the way and make sure everybody's on board. But I also want to cover some content. So I'm going to do 3 presentations tonight. So it'll be a little bit longer than most weeks, where you'll have, in weeks 2 and on, you'll have a recorded message available. And some weeks you'll have a live walkthrough of the software. But this will be a little bit longer. So if you need to leave for whatever reason, I'm not offended. If you want to go watch the Iowa caucuses or something instead of this, that's up to you. So I like to, you know, I have certain material I have to cover, and like I say, everything will be recorded. So I'm going to start with an intro to our course. I know everybody's read a lot of the information, or hopefully much of the information at the website, but it's always good to review the bidding and make sure that we've been fairly clear on what it is we're going to do in the course. So this will be a course overview. Here's the agenda, you know, a little bit about introductions in the seminar and so forth, usual kind of stuff. And I'll try to get through this quickly so I can get to some of the content that I think is important for tonight. But it's also important that everybody understands the rules of the road, so to speak, what you've agreed to in terms of taking this course. So having said that, let me press ahead. Introductions. You know, I like to look at people's bios, see where they work, maybe what their interests are, maybe their background, a little bit of experience. If you feel that you'd like to contribute that, you know, update your bio. Sometimes I can tweak some of the lessons to be of more interest if I had a little bit more on the bio. The second bullet is very important, however. You want to make sure that that email address that shows up in the Leo classroom is in fact correct, because we'll be using that quite often. And then, as I said, if you have something you're interested in, you'd like to see more of, what you do for a living, feel free to add that. My bio is there, or at least a brief bio. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I spent 20 years in the United States Air Force, and since then I've been teaching for a living. I was at the National Defense University both as a military and civilian for about 20 years. I've been at UMUC since 1998. I ran the Chief Information Officer program for about 7 years. Program director for that, and I've taught in the MBA and the doctoral programs, Doctor of Management programs, and of course now I'm fully engaged in the business analytics world and data analytics world, which I love. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in math, a master's in business, and a doctorate in operations research management. So I'm very happy, very comfortable with numbers, quantitative things, etc. I also understand that the bottom line is ultimately, what can you do for the business case? It's not enough to be able to crank out models. You have to be able to operationalize those. More on that later. And here we go. You know, when we developed this program, we wanted to meld decision-making and analytics. Thought that was an important sort of niche for us, if you will. There are a lot of programs out there that do various things, but our niche is trying to focus on decision-making and analytics and the marriage of those two. Having said that, we chose for this course, the data course, the 610 course, a very good book. Excuse me, Tom Davenport, who's one of the giants of the business. His book, as you now know, Keeping Up with the Quants, focuses on 3 things. Framing the decision. In other words, first you have to outline what decision you're making and why it's important, what data is needed. Then making the decision is actually then analyzing it, would be building the model. What kind of analytical approach is needed? What kind of model do I use? And then finally, you got to sell your answer. Some of you may have already looked at, I hope, some of the required readings, one of which is sort of how to overcome some decision biases. And I'll say a little bit more about that specific article, so I think it's great a little bit later on. But keep these 3 major themes in mind. We frame the decision, which means we outline exactly what it is and why we're doing it and who's doing it and what they're going to do. Then we build the model to accompany that decision, and then we sell it. You have to explain it in clear terms. You know, where fact of life is that most people running organizations today come from a generation, my generation, where they didn't grow up with computers or analytics. And so for them, it's still much more comfortable to make decisions with gut feel, intuition, hunch, experience, etc. And I'll say a lot more about that in the second presentation tonight when we talk about decision biases. So I've spent a lot of time focused on decision making and taught a lot of courses in decision making, and tying that to analytics, I think, is a great, great opportunity. Okay, so a couple other reminders. First of all, as you probably are aware, UMUC is becoming a competency-based set of programs. All of the programs are moving towards a competency-based, and that's to your benefit. It's no longer enough to say, I know about things, or, people that hire you, employers want to see, what can you actually do? I know you know a lot, but what can you do? And so we made the decision to move to a competency-based program right at the start of the business analytics, because we were right in the early stages of UMUC making this transition for all its programs. So that means you really are graded on what you can do, not what you know. Now, of course, you have to know a lot of stuff before you can do anything, so it's wrapped up in that, but you're not going to be writing papers that sort of analyze any theories or things like that. You're going to be actually doing things. You're going to be building models, you're going to be framing problems, you're going to be making presentations, etc. In the past, many courses at UMUC had an assignment every week. We don't have that. We have 5 assignments. Well, 6 if you want to count discussions, but we have these 5 assignments spaced out over the program. And so that allows a little bit of time in between, hopefully enough time, for you to gain your competency-based knowledge so that you can do things. So when you're going to have if you're going to have a competency-based approach, you have to give people time to absorb and learn things and try things and experiment with things, especially new software, before they can actually deliver something. So we've tried to space them out. Now, the weeks in between the weeks that assignments are due do have activities which are designed to help keep you on track. Some things you can do with the software, some different opportunities for discussion and interaction, etc. So it's strongly encouraged that you not say, oh, I have a week off because I don't have an assignment due. No. The worst possible mistake you can make in this course, and I've been teaching it since it started, and we're now in year 2. We started in the spring of, year 3 actually, we started in the spring of 2014. So every time there is a student with a problem, it's because they haven't been able to keep up and get too far behind, and of course it snowballs. Remember, the deal when you signed up for this program is that you would spend anywhere from 15 to 20 hours per week. That's a lot of hours. But if you want to do the readings, you want to participate in the discussions, you want to practice with the software and do the assignments, that's what it's going to take. I don't want to fool you and say it's going to be a piece of cake, because it's not. There's a lot of work to do, so keep up with that. Okay, back to the outline of a little more specifics, a little more of a drill down. These are the assignments and when they're due, and I've tried to put the due dates in the classroom so you have some idea of the specific days for my section when the assignments are due. So your first assignment is due week 3, and you're going to be framing a problem. Remember, that first step was to frame a problem. You're going to use a piece of software that I'm sure none of you have ever used before. It's called Decisions First. We're going to be doing a walkthrough. I'll be doing an overview/walkthrough of Decisions First, and there are many other tutorials available with it next week. Definitely on Monday night. Again, that will be recorded for those that can't make it. Then we move from that to a new software package we're using for the first time this semester, Watson Analytics. And that's from IBM. It's a very, very interesting, unique piece of software. Really a great way to start your venture into the world of analytics. You'll really enjoy that piece of software. I think you'll enjoy all the software in the course. But we're going to be using Watson Analytics for several assignments because it has several pieces to it. You'll be doing an assignment where you do data exploration and cleaning and so forth in due week 5. And again, you'll have an intro and a walkthrough and plenty of help with that. You'll have another assignment in week 7 where you use Watson Analytics to actually develop a model. A predictive model, if you will. Then, in order to acquaint you with the world of open source software, we're going to spend a couple of weeks looking at the R programming language. unlike Watson Analytics, unlike Decision First, which are mostly drag and drop kind of things, the R language is a programming language. It is wildly popular because it's basically free. And because there have been many, many, many already built models and modules and approaches and assistants and tools already built. So it's basically, if you don't want to do much programming, you can usually find something already built that's, again, open source, free to use, and use that. So you'll have an assignment with the R language. It'll just get you started with R. It's not designed to teach you in great depth on R, because that comes in subsequent courses, but it will get you started. Then your last assignment, other than the discussion, is a team assignment, where you're going to go back to Watson Analytics and do a full-blown soup to nuts assignment using Watson Analytics in a team approach, which will allow you to use a little bit larger data set, allow you to do a little bit more depth. So I think you'll see how that unfolds. It'll be really nice. And then finally, there is a small piece of your grade, 5%, that's based on your contributions to the discussions items. You will notice, if you've looked, there are discussion items for pretty much every week. We would like you to contribute to that. And so we're obviously going to grade you on your contributions. Now, your contributions should be insightful. They should be interesting, not just, oh, I like this or something like that. You know, it's a good time for you to share what's going on perhaps in your organization. Maybe your organization's already using an analytics package. Maybe it's using Watson. Maybe you see a spot where you could use the Decisions First to frame a problem right away. Maybe you've got some people in your organization using R, and you want to comment on how effective that's been, or what kind of a payoff they've had, or what kind of trouble they've run into in terms of getting through the corporate maze of trying to get things established. Have you been able to sell the analytics? So there's a lot of opportunities in the discussions for you to contribute a lot of the things that are going on, especially in your organization. And I find that very useful. It gives us insights. You know, we as professors have a lot of textbooks, we have a lot of articles, we have a lot of resources. You, as actually out there on the firing line, have the real firsthand experience of being in the real world and saying what is and isn't working in analytics. Is the corporate culture holding you back, and so forth? Or are you just in need of resources, or you don't know where to start, or are you up and running and doing quite well with it? So, interesting ideas. So that's what the discussion items are basically for. Provide some interactivity, some exchange of ideas, and so we have a very small percentage of your course grade, 5% based on that. Okay? Now, as you know by now, because I think almost all of you have done it, you have to sign up to the Academic Integrity Pledge. We started that a couple of years ago, and I think it's a great idea. You know, we want to make sure everybody understands that you're to do your own work, that this is your work, and you're taking honest credit for your work and your work only. So the Academic Integrity Pledge is there, and you need to make sure you do that and sign, not sign, but digitally sign the form so that you get access to all of the course content. You'll have another ungraded assignment due, but it's a sort of a stopgap thing, not a stopgap, but it's a stopper if you don't do it. When we get to Watson Analytics, which will come in week 4 and on, the people at Big Data University, which is an outfit run by IBM, and the people that produce Watson Analytics, have a fundamentals course that takes about 2 hours to complete. It will walk you through various pieces of Watson Analytics, have you do some little exercises, and get you some familiarity with Watson Analytics beyond the walkthrough that we're going to provide. And so we are going to require that you take that 2-hour course and complete it, and take a screenshot of your certificate you achieve when you complete the course and deposit that. So there is an assignment area where you can deposit the Watson Analytics Fundamental Course Completion Certificate. And so that will be due at the end of week 4. Okay? Here's the software we're going to be using. I've already referred to it, but let me just remind you. Decisions First, designed not to build analytical models, but to frame the outline of the problem you're going to solve with the analytical model. Because they found that that's very important. If you don't do this first, you likely are going to just venture off into a land of infinite loops and like going down a rabbit holes in Alice in Wonderland. So you need to really have a focus. Here's what we want to do with this analytical effort we're about to undertake. And that's what I think Decisions First does better than any software package I have used in 25 years to try to do this. And I'm a big fan of framing. You'll see why when we get to the next presentation on decision biases. But I'm a big fan that you have to frame your decision. I might also mention that Decisions First is used in this course, and I would heartily recommend that you keep it in mind when you get to your Data 670 course, the practicum, because in the practicum you're going to be trying to outline and do a real-world kind of problem. What better thing to do than to first frame it and then to make sure that your organization says, oh yeah, that's exactly what we want. Then, of course, Watson Analytics, a cloud-based package, allows you to do, as I said, data exploration, build models with a level of ease and intuitiveness that I think is probably unmatched by any other analytical package. So it's a good starter package. Some of the heavier lifting comes along in Data 620, 30, 40, and 50, where you get into big data and predictive analytics and things like that. But this is an excellent start, and it's a very powerful package. It's not just a little toy. And then, of course, the third package I said we'll be using is the R open source programming language. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing with software. I'm your instructor for the course. This is my preferred email address, my UMUC address. If that's not working for some reason, you know, occasionally things do go down, I can also be reached at escanode@gmail.com. If you have an emergency, there's my phone number. And no, I don't mind being called for emergencies or for special assistance or special situation where you need help. That's my phone number, and that's why it's there. There are required readings each week, as you know. Please do them, because my assumption going into whatever recorded lectures and all I do is that you did do them. So I don't have to repeat what's in them. That's the bottom line, is to start with that. Some weeks I've posted some multimedia videos and things like that you should also watch. The book, again, is called Keeping Up with the Quants. It's by Tom Davenport and Jay Kim. And Mr. Davenport, again, is legendary in this business, so you'll see many other links to Tom Davenport presentations, articles, and things like that. So I like to provide many additional web-based articles and links in the required readings. I also, if you look at the lesson guidance that I have for each week, you'll see there are additional resources for those who have time and want to take the effort to look beyond the required readings. There are always more things. We also have, again, unless you're brand new to Leo, you know about this, we also have a news section in the Leo classroom. I like to post whenever I find something extremely interesting. I will post it in that news section almost immediately. So you really need to check that often. Occasionally, postings there will point you to things that will be very helpful in what you're trying to do, or change slightly, perhaps what the due date or the assignment or something. So check the news date, the news item frequently. Every day would be ideal. I know many of you may not be able to do it every day, but certainly you want to do it frequently. Okay? Grading. On time, on task work earns an 80 to 85. Higher grades are reserved for better work. If you do your assignments on time, cover all taskings completely and do it well, submit your paper without typos, properly referenced, no misspellings, grammar errors, etc., that is a good, solid B. So don't think that, oh, I did it on time and I did what he told me to do, that you're going to get an A. In order to increase your grade or increase your opportunity for a higher grade, you have to show significant intellectual interactions beyond the minimum. Okay, let's put it that way. Sometimes that means adding depth or breadth. Sometimes that means being more thorough. Sometimes that means providing alternate viewpoints and supporting those viewpoints. Sometimes it means examples. Sometimes it means other things. It's kind of hard to say because each assignment's a little bit different, but you got to show significant critical thinking beyond just addressing the taskings in order to increase the chances of getting a higher grade. Again, no guarantees. So now B is a very solid grade. B every course and you will graduate. And so that's the norm, that's the standard for UMUC. Okay? Obviously, if you have a complaint or pushback, feel free to email me or call me and we'll talk about it. Okay? Again, a couple of reminders, read the news often. We have, or I have a special discussion area called Let Me Have Any Questions. If you have a question that you think the answer would benefit all, please post it there because everybody can have access to the discussion items. And so I can answer the question once and everybody can go see it and say, well, I was about to ask that too. So that way it's very good. If it's a question you think only pertains to you and is very, very specific and wouldn't be necessarily beneficial to all, you can email me with the question. And I try to answer all questions within 24 hours. Now, that may not be possible if we have some kind of a problem with the internet or if it's a weekend, but I do try to answer them very, very promptly. So, after this week, most weeks there will be a recorded lecture and lesson material posted on Vimeo by midnight Sunday, and you'll get a link with the password for those recorded lectures. So I try to go in and cover what we did last week, and then I probably provide a little bit of lecture material for the upcoming week and some guidance on the assignments, etc. And so you want to be sure to look at those just as soon as you can, because the earlier in the week you look at them, the more time you have to deal with any requirements. So that'll start with week 2. In addition to those, of course, we will have the live walkthroughs, one for each of the pieces of software. Again, first one will be next Monday, and you'll get a link to the WebEx for that. I try to keep the lecture short. It says 30 to 45 minutes. Most of them will actually be shorter than that. Again, an overview of the lesson, just to make sure we're all clear what it is to be done that week. The walkthroughs I mentioned. If we need online office hours, everybody says, we got to show up and ask a lot of questions. I can provide that. And of course, in the discussions area, you can post things anytime. So you'll get the password. And again, basics. Okay, so let me start you by just giving you a quick overview of the first 2 weeks. Well, the first week is the getting settled week and getting started week, but you will receive your access to decisions first within the next day or two. Okay, how to log in and get started. There are many, many, many tutorials, videos, walkthroughs already out there. One excellent one at this link by Mr. Taylor himself, the creator of the software, and James Taylor and I, Truth in Advertising, work together quite closely. We presented at Predictive Analytics World last March, and we'll be presenting at the Data Warehouse Institute this April. So we do presentations together. I like his software quite a bit. He provides it to us at very little cost. So don't sign yourself up. We'll provide the necessary login information from the vendor. If you feel like, I can't wait for that next Monday walkthrough, I want to look ahead and see what this is all about, there's a good link to start with, because that is Mr. Taylor walking you through the software. Now, he gets a little beyond the basics and gets a little bit into some of the advanced features. So if it's too much to digest, wait for the walkthrough and then go back to it. So that's week 1, sort of getting your feet on the ground, get caught up on the readings and so forth. In week 2, you will have plenty of time to basically use and learn decisions first before you have to submit your first assignment at the end of week 3. So you'll have a couple of 2.5 weeks or so to work on that. Okay? So does anyone have a specific question about the admin side before I get into some of the content, which I find extremely interesting? Hopefully you will too. But if you do, feel free to post it in the chat room, or you can wait until later, or you can certainly post it anytime during the week. But I want to make sure people are all on the same page in terms of how the course is going to operate. Now, I'm going to move to decision-making biases and traps. Before we can really convince our organizations to run with analytics, you may first have to dissuade them of using hunch, intuition, gut feel, because in many cases, those have been successful and may have worked. But now we're approaching a different environment on two fronts. You know, I was at the National Defense University for 23 years, both again as a military and civilian, teaching generals and admirals decision making and teaching them technology and how technology could support decision making. So I go back to the days when it was really not much there, you know, spreadsheets and maybe word processing and so forth. But, you know, they would always say, Steve, look, I've got stars on my shoulder. I've been very successful making decisions without any technology, without a computer. Why should I switch? I've used my gut feel, I've used my hunch, I've used my intuition. And that's a pretty powerful argument against using analytics, isn't it? Except I tried to convince them, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not, over the last 20 years I was there before I retired from that job, that things were changing. And it's certainly changing on two fronts. First, the amount of data that's available to make decisions is overwhelming compared to what we had when most of them were going through their careers. Again, we're talking about my tenure at the National Defense University was from 1979 to 2003. So it was the beginning formative years, if you will, of using computer technology. None of them had had the opportunity to use computers in any way, shape, or form for the most part. The second feature is that others are beginning to use computers and analytics and decision support systems to make decisions. So if you want to compete with them using your hunch, intuition, and gut feel, it better be very, very good because they're using data. And I think over the years that I've been vindicated that it turns out that data-driven decisions, by and large, are much, much better than gut feel. And I'm going to try to convince you of that a little bit in this presentation. So again, I've done a lot of work in teaching courses in decision biases and things like that. And so we need to sort of set the stage in the background because this is why analytics is important. It's because you can no longer expect to make good decisions with just using a coin toss or a hunch. Okay, so a little background. Executives rate decision making is the most important business skill there is. Probably one of the few things we can't outsource. You know, we can outsource a lot of stuff, but we really can't outsource decision making. So if you're good at decision making, if you're able to bring in the appropriate factors, you're able to frame the appropriate decision, you're able to put it in the proper context, you're able to build the right model, you're able to articulate why the model has a high probability of success, not guaranteed, I think you stand a good chance. I did some of this even in my Air Force days because I had generals who just said, my gut feel says go left or my gut feel says drop a bomb or something. And I would try to show them, because I was doing a lot of studies in analytics even then, crude ones, that, well, the evidence says that's not going to work, okay? Anyway, you might go look at this article because it's very interesting. Now, one of my favorite all-time books is called Decision Traps, written in 1987. By two guys, Russo and Schumacher. It's an interesting book because it did two things. First of all, it summarized 25 years of cognitive research, which showed, I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, that decision making with hunch, gut feel, and instinct is basically a bad way to go. In fact, the conclusion of the book is if you want to make decisions with hunch, gut feel, instinct, they should be very simple ones that don't matter. So, you know, it was my go-to book when I was trying to convince people that decision-making with hunch and gut feel was not a good way to go. It's still out there, still be a good book to buy. I'll talk a little bit about a newer version of the same kind of book in just a second. So let's back it up a little bit and say, now, what is a good decision? Some people think a good decision is one that completely solves the problem. You know, I always use the example of Social Security. Everyone says, why can't we fix Social Security? And when you say, you know, the answer is either raise your taxes, and everybody says, oh, no, don't do that. Or take lower benefits, everybody says, oh, no, don't do that. Or delay benefits till you're older, everybody says, oh, no, don't do that. Or die earlier. Those are the only solutions to fixing the Social Security problem, and nobody wants to do any of those. So people are looking for a decision that will fix Social Security, but not require them to die early, not require them to take less benefits, not require them to pay more taxes, and not require them to take benefits later. Not going to happen. So we really need to make sure that decisions are defined by alternatives that best, or at least are anticipated to best, achieve your objectives. That means putting a clear differentiation between relative decisions and absolute decisions. Okay? Relative decisions and absolute decisions. Because it's important that you understand the difference. I always like to use the little joke about the two businessmen that come out of a building and there's a robber and he sticks a gun out and says, hand over your wallets. And instead of doing so, they start running away and the robber runs after them. And one of them, this is the sort of absolute decision maker, looks back and says, I see that guy gaining. He's much younger. Let's just stop and give him our wallets. We'll never outrun him. The other one, the relative decision maker, says, I'm not trying to outrun him. I'm trying to outrun you. Because if I outrun you, you'll get robbed, but I won't. And that's a better answer than both of us getting robbed. Now, it's still not a good answer you'd like to have, but it is the better answer than both getting robbed. At least most people would think so. And of course, statistics can be useful. In fact, they're critical in helping you decide what is the likelihood and what is the answer that is likely to achieve the result we want. So a good decision has to be defined by what's best among the alternatives you have. I think we've seen a lot of discussion, without naming any names, during this political season, of people who think they can solve problems without any pain, without any strain, and I don't think that's ever going to happen. Now, Herb Simon won a Nobel Prize for outlining the phases of decision-making: intelligence, design, and choice. Over the years, we've added a fourth one, which is implementation. And that sort of coincides with what we're talking about in this program. The intelligence and the design are basically the framing. The choice is basically choosing among the models and the alternatives you've got, and the implementation is selling it. So this is really an important part. Now, you notice this fourth one, implementation, was added later. It turns out that's one of the most important aspects of analytics. You can build a fancy neural net model, a fancy multiple regression model, decision tree model, an ensemble model, but can you explain it? Can you convince others that you've considered the right variables, the right factors, left out the extraneous information? Can you convince others that they have good reason to make inputs? Can you communicate and sort of co-opt people into the decision process? Can you maintain an audit trail so 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years after a decision, if it doesn't work, you can go back and try to figure out why? Can you avoid what we call the BOGSAT method, bunch of guys and gals sitting around together, which is still a very common method of decision making? And of course, iteration is almost always necessary. Those are some of the kind of the key things you have to remember when you're building analytical models. Now, what makes decision-making so difficult? Because we do it every day, don't we? We decide what socks to wear, what road to take to work, what to have for lunch. Well, that's because those are easy decisions. Hard decisions have multiple conflicting objectives. Yes, we'd all like to lower our taxes, but we'd also like to balance the budget. Multiple perspectives. Different people see problems differently. Again, look at the election cycle we're in. Uncertainty. People need to get away from absolute and move to relative answers. Again, some people want a whole loaf or none, and a lot of times, most of the time, they get none, but that's up to them. Nonlinear utilities. More is not necessarily better. If you said I can get a car that goes 80 miles an hour for $20,000, the question is, would you pay $40,000 for a car that can go 160 miles an hour? And the answer is no. Because, yeah, I'm getting double the speed for double the money, but I can't go that fast on the roads. It's illegal. So why would I pay for that capability when I don't need it and can't use it? And that's what happens with most utilities. We reach a point where you've got enough of something that more really doesn't add to it. And these nonlinear utilities are troublesome because they're hard to quantify. We also have qualitative objectives. You know, how do you qualify political acceptability and things like that? And there are models out there that do that actually, but it's not easy. We have greater complexity in the world than ever before. We have greater time compression than ever before. We have information overload that bedevils all of us. And of course, we come back to the absolute relative trade-off. And on top of all these, which make decisions difficult, on top of all these, guess what? We have built-in biases. And I know you're thinking, well, I don't. Just these other characters do. No, we all do. We all have them. I've highlighted some of the key readings I've used over the years to sort of try to convince people of this, you know, and I'm going to go through those briefly, just a couple of them, just briefly. G.A. Miller in 1956 wrote a great paper called The Magic Number 7 Plus or Minus 2, where based on his research and based on all the studies and the experiments he did, he concluded, and most people agree with this, that you could remember about 7 things, 5 to 7 things. Now, when I have live classes where I'm in the classroom all day, guess what I do? I say, let's sing the 12 Days of Christmas. You'd be surprised. Everybody is there up through 5 golden rings. 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, partridge, and pear tree. We all got that. But guess how many people know when the swans come in, or the lords, or the pipers? You know, it's a serious drop-off there, right? How about the 7 dwarfs? You know, Disney read this article and said, you know, I'm going to take the 9 dwarfs that I've got, and I'm going to take Lefty and Shorty out of the mix because people will have a hard time remembering 7. Well, that story may or may not be true. I may have made that up. But it's probably true that most of us have a hard time remembering much more than 7 things, plus or minus 2. It's one reason your Social Security number is broken into 3 pieces. It's one reason your phone number is broken into 3 pieces. If you chunk the knowledge, and we don't have time to discuss chunking too much, but if you chunk the knowledge, you can probably stretch it to maybe 9 things. Again, decision traps I mentioned earlier. These are the 10 decision traps that were right out of the book, by the way. The first 3 I've highlighted in red are framing decisions, framing mistakes, framing biases, plunging in without a frame, frame blindness, thinking your frame is the only one that matters, lack of frame control, letting it grow out of bounds. All of those are framing problems. And then there's other problems, overconfidence in your judgment, shooting from the hip, et cetera, et cetera. Again, well worth purchasing and reading, or I can send you links to more detailed articles about the same thing, but it is really quite good, and it should convince you because they've got a lot of little tips and tricks and experiments in there that invariably you fall into. Now, the article written, again, if I go back to this article, again, 1986, Towards Intelligent DSS Decision Support Systems, outlined all the many biases that we know from evidence exist. I'm not going to go through all these tonight, but I did put them in the slide. You can go get this article from the UMUC library and read it. But just go through these when you get a chance, because you can download these slides from the Leo website and take a look and see, have you made any of these? Because we all have. You know, the way you display logic, the way you present alternatives, whether the alternatives are presented negatively or positively, makes a difference. We know from evidence as to what people pick, which ones people pick. People seek information consistent with their own views. That's why some people watch Fox, some people watch MSNBC, right? We want to hear people who tell us what we want to hear. People downplay data which contradicts their views. We know all these biases exist. Frequency bias. You know, people say, well, look, George Burns lived to 100. He smoked cigars and drank every day. See, that's one data point. That's what we call an outlier. That's not the norm. Heuristic biases, structuring problems based on your experiences without taking into consideration the fact that things are changing. Using rules of thumbs, anchoring. I'm going to go through a couple of these in a little more detail in a second just to give you some examples. Gambler's fallacy. The dice have thrown 7 6 times in a row. They can't possibly throw another 7. Yes, they can. They don't have any memory. If you start by saying, what are the odds of throwing 7 sevens in a row, that's different than saying, what are the odds of throwing the 7 on my next roll, given that the 6 have been rolled, and so forth. So I'll let you read those because I don't want to spend all night on those. Now, I mentioned there was an updated sort of version of basically what the Decision Traps book from 1987 contained. There is a researcher called Dan Ariely. If you want to know about decision biases, this is a name to remember because he's doing tremendous research. He wrote a book called Predictably Irrational, and we used it here at UMUC in a course on decision making that I taught. And what his conclusion was that people make irrational but predictable mistakes. Well, that's good news because if you recognize those and they're predictable, you can counter them, okay? And so this irrationality can be recognized and overcome, but only with coaching and only with being reminded of all the biases we have. And so if you go to his YouTube site, you will see that Dan Ariely publishes little vignettes. He's published great books. He's still doing great research, etc., and they're all there for you free. Just tons of stuff. I mean, he actually has a vignette on each chapter, and it's not just a talking head. It's a really good experiment. Now, let me give you a couple of brief examples. I mentioned that one of the most serious biases we have is anchoring. And this is from Kahneman and other people's work, Tversky and Ariely and everybody. Anchoring. So when I taught in the MBA program and I had a full day of live teaching, I tried something. And I tried an anchoring experiment that's right out of a book, in one of the Ariely books. And here it is. I gave half of the class, now I didn't let anybody use the internet, of course. I gave half of the class a piece of paper that said this: is the population of Turkey greater or less than 35 million people? And I asked them to check one of the boxes. And of course, they weren't talking to each other, and they weren't talking to the other half of the class, and nor did they know that the other half of the class got a different piece of paper. And then a second part it said on that piece of paper is, what is your estimate of the population of Turkey? Okay, here are the results. When I asked it that way, the average answer I got was 33 million. Now, I have no idea even today how many people live in Turkey, nor do I care. What I was trying to do was anchor them on this number and see if they would get anchored by this first question and have it influence the answer to their second question. It looks like maybe it did. But to be fair, I gave the other half of the class this piece of paper. Is the population of Turkey greater or less than 100 million people? Check one of the boxes. And what is your estimate of the population of Turkey? Now here, clearly, I'm trying to anchor them on this number, and guess what happened? Average answer, 106 million. Now think about that. I was able to convince people by asking this first question. I was able to influence their answers substantially. That's what anchoring does. When somebody points out that, oh, you can get this $50,000 car for $40,000, you think, wow, that's a tremendous savings. They're anchoring you on a crazy number and hoping you'll do something near it. I also used to use a little spinning wheel that was marked off in increments of 10, and I would spin it and say, oh, it stopped on 60. And then I would ask the class, how many people belong to the United Nations? This was an undergrad class. And they would answer somewhere between usually 55 and 65. If the spinning wheel stopped on 40, they would answer somewhere between 45 and maybe 50. Amazing how easy it is to anchor people's beliefs. This is another one called the decoy option. This is a true one, by the way, again, right out of a book, right out of Dan Ariely's book. This actually happened. The people at The Economist sent this out and said, would you like to have an internet-only subscription to The Economist for $59 or a print internet subscription for $125? And it turns out that basically about 25% of the people picked the more expensive option. However, they had a misprint, at least we think it was, maybe they did on purpose, and a lot of people got this. Would you like to have internet only for $59, print only for $125, or both for $125? Remember, this one was saying internet only $59, print and internet $125. This one threw in what we call a decoy option, which is this one. And guess what? 55% of the people picked option 3, which is the same as the 25% of the people who picked option 2. Exact same thing, print and internet for $125. So they were able to get quite a bit more takers. Now, to make it even more personable to me, I actually got this in the mail in the summer of 2013. I had been subscribed to Fast Company, nice magazine. And they said, wouldn't you like to renew? Here's your offer. 3 years for $10, 2 years for $10, or 1 year for $5. And I probably would have taken the 1 year, except I said, well, who's crazy enough to do this when you can get $10 and get 3 years? And so, yes, I took the 3-year option. Another brief example, data misinterpretation. If I told you here are 4 sets of data, and believe it or not, and these are true facts, they each have the same number of data points. They each have the same mean for the X data points. They each have the same mean for the Y data points. The same regression line will go through each of them. The same standard error of the slope, the same sum of squares, the same regression sum of squares, residual sum of squares, the same correlation coefficient, the same R squared. All 4 data sets, these factors, these statistics are the same. You might think, well, the data sets are pretty similar, unless you graph them. There they are. They don't look quite the same now, do they? No, they don't. No, they don't. And yet, these are all the same. The power of visual statistics. Okay, so we've got overconfidence, which is the mother of all bias. Every one of us, by the way, thinks we know more than we really do know. We have overestimation, we have overplacement. You know, all the people in Lake Wobegon are above average, for example. Some brief examples. This was again from Schumacher. They used to give tests where this was what you were shooting for and this is what you got in terms of wrong, misses. And you can see everybody was way off. And I used to do the same thing in class with different questions, and it always came out that most people were in the category what we call blowhards, meaning they thought they knew a lot more than they really knew. Okay, so how can we fix this? Well, we're going to say a little bit more about this next week. I'm not going to just cover all this tonight. But we can use mathematical models. We can use intuition properly. And people have tried things like Blink, rational models, wisdom of crowds. We'll talk about some of these during the course. But the bottom line is maybe a model would be very useful because it certainly brings order to chaos. It helps with the framing. When you frame it, you say, this is what I'm trying to decide. This specific question is what I'm trying to answer. These are the specific pieces I need to answer it. This is the specific kind of analytical assistance I need. These are the specific sources of experience and expertise I need. These are the specific people I need involved. This is where the organization fits in. All of that. And Decisions First covers all of that. Reduce overlooked items. Understand the issues. Codify your thinking. Make the audit trail codified, available. We know that people come out of a meeting and 2 hours later they can't even remember what they were doing in there in terms of make your decisions more explainable and more justifiable. Okay, so for this week, by the way, just as a little sort of self-check on your decision making, I'm asking you to go look at this. There's a link in there, that a short little questionnaire, and answer it very honestly. This is not going to be graded, and I'm not trying to be pejorative against anybody, but answer it very honestly and post your results and try to see if this gives you some insights into how you solve problems. You can see where it puts you based on your score, whether you're a confident problem solver or whether you are hit and miss or whether you avoid problems. Pretty interesting. And it's a circular thing. You can improve. You can actually, turns out you can improve your decision making. Okay, so back to week 2. In week 2, we're going to cover a lot more about how analytics helps decision-making. I hope I've made the case that decision-making without analytics is pretty dicey, at least dicey, maybe even more than dicey. By the way, if you go to that article again, Decision Biases, from your links, you'll see even more information. You can start looking at some of the tutorials if you choose to go early before we get to it. This is for week 2. This is what we're going to cover, and we're going to get into great depth with Decisions First. And that brings us to, again, office hours for tonight. If you have questions you want to ask now, feel free. If you want to ask them during the week, again, this is a nice place for questions that apply to all. And if they're just you, you can send me email. If it's emergency, call me. Now, unless you're totally worn out, I'm going to cover one more presentation. This one's pretty short, so we'll still probably get out of here in just a little bit over an hour. Whoops, let me get back to the top of this one. Whoops, that's the course overview. Sorry, I want to go to data analytics. A brief intro to data analytics. I'm going to say a lot more about data analytics, but I want to make sure you understand what course you're in, a little bit of background. This is one of my favorite charts. I'm a sucker for great graphics. I just think they help you grasp what's going on quite nicely, even if you're not what we call a visual learner. I don't consider myself necessarily a visual learner. Some people are. But I love great graphics. And this is a beauty from FICO, by the way, because it puts things in perspective. And we're right in here, right? We're in this 2000 to the present where analytics is starting to have a deep impact and, poised for the takeoff. One of the reasons you're probably in this program is you've seen how many open jobs there are, 150,000 plus open jobs for data scientists. Everybody wants to do analytics, but it does take some people that understand the models, understand the process, can explain the models, can sell the answers to make it happen. So we're in this nice piece here. Now you'll have to blow this up to get a little better look at it, but we're starting to see widespread analytics use. Most of that use is still descriptive analytics, which is looking at, okay, here's what's happened, but we're starting to see significant movement towards predictive analytics. Let's try to predict what's going to happen and do something about it. We're seeing natural language processing show up in analytics. Guess where you're going to see that? It's built into Watson Analytics. One of the things Watson Analytics inherited from the big Watson program that won Jeopardy at IBM is a lot of natural language processing built in. That makes it much easier. Big data, you're certainly going to see that when you get to Data610. Server farms and their low-cost, high-speed processing. Guess what? All of our programs, you have to download and run on your software, but Decisions First and, of course, Watson both run in the cloud. Growing demand for talent. Wow, thank goodness. And this even more promising, 190,000 more analytics experts and 1.5 million more data literate managers needed by 2018. So you better finish this program on time. And then look, a peek ahead at what's coming next. Cloud-based, people use analytics in everyday decisions. God, I hope so. Curing rare diseases, predictive policing, anticipatory analytics, mass marketing campaigns are dead. Everybody's now focused on what is it Steve Canode will buy. Forget sending out, what kind of golf clubs does he want? So we've got three real main categories of analytics, again, right out of your textbook. Descriptive analytics, which looks at what happened. And you see things like dashboards, data visualization, data mining, knowledge discovery, all good things. You got to know what happened first. The sweet spot, if you want to call it that, is moving into predictive analytics, where what is likely to happen. Because now you can take some action. If you know what's likely to happen, you can be ready for that. So we're looking at models, neural networks, regression, machine learning, and so forth, kind of predictive models. You get a lot of this, a little bit of this in this course. You get a lot of this in Data610. And then there's the prescriptive analytics, where we use business rules, optimization, experimental design to say what's the best thing to do. And we don't do much of that yet, but organizations are starting to move towards that with rules. Mr. Taylor is an expert on business rules, decision management. He's an expert on decision management, and so forth. Again, another chart sort of taking that same thing, the three categories, descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive, and there they are, and giving you a little more of a breakdown. I like this chart too. It says, here's what the user needs to do. Here's what the user needs to know. Here's how analytics gets answers, and here's what makes this possible. And so now what has happened, what could happen, what should happen, those are the three things we said fall into these categories. This gives you a little more meat on the bone as to some specifics, okay? What are the things we could and should do? So I'll let you digest a little bit of that chart, and we'll unfold some more of that during the course. How is analytics used? Again, another chart. This one from SAS, software we use in Data610. And again, the sweet spot is up in here, where we're starting to predict what's going to happen next, and in optimization, what should happen. But they're all variable things. They're all variable aspects and parts of analytics. Now, predictive analytics, which I said is becoming the sweet spot, uses a lot of different kinds of things. I'm not going to dwell on those tonight, but just to give you a quick chart, here it is, and some of the things that we're able to do with predictive analytics. I'm just finishing what I think is probably one of the best books. I started with Eric Siegel's first book called Predictive Analytics. He just came out with his second book. I would recommend that you buy it and read it. Eric Siegel, Siegel, Predictive Analytics, The Power to Predict Who Will Click, Buy, Lie, or Die, second version. He's got over 180 specific examples of predictive analytics being used by specific companies and how effective they are. What kind of decisions can predictive analytics help with? Again, another nice gee whiz chart. Look at the wide variety of things that predictive analytics can help with. That's why it's a sweet spot. But all analytics are good. Some recent success stories. 37% reduction in readmission rates. You know, the Medicare doesn't pay if you're readmitted to a hospital for the same thing within a certain period of time. So it's important to identify patients who might likely be readmitted and give them some extra care or something. Follow up more closely with them so they don't have to be readmitted. ER doctors reducing tests and overnight stays by using analytics and real-time data in the emergency room to predict test outcomes. 58% reduction in surgical site infections using real-time analytics. I'm emphasizing that word because that's one of the trends, moving towards real-time, moving towards cloud, moving towards mobile. A lot more of that downstream. And finally, optimizing, forecasting events likely to exacerbate symptoms. So how does analytics improve decision? Well, we're back to that. Framing it, making it transparent. You know, if somebody says, how'd you get that? You should be able to explain it. And one of the ways you have to explain it is to say, here was the problem we started with, meaning it's the frame, and here's the answer. You can handle much more data. You're not limited to that 7 plus or minus 2. It speeds up decisions, maybe. You know, it can take a long time to build a good analytical model, so it may not speed up decisions. I can make a gut feel decision pretty quickly. Fosters innovation. Yes, it does foster innovation. People start thinking of new ways. Enables the use of more complex models, performs complex calculations. You'll be delighted to know that the software now does all of the heavy lifting calculations-wise behind the scenes. I go back to the day when you had to do those by hand, and I can tell you, you're in great shape now. Standardizes the approach to decision-making. If you require evidence-based decisions, you're going to standardize how things are done, and we'll say more about that. In fact, some of your readings will take you into greater depth in this, so be sure and do the readings. Gives you that audit trail so you can look back and say, what do we do right, what do we do wrong? And it actually changes the business model. Now, what do you watch out for? These are two things I always make sure people know to watch out for. Learning things that aren't true. When you get a pattern out of a data model, it may just be a spurious correlation. It may not actually be cause and effect. It's always hard to prove cause and effect. It may not reflect the real population. Maybe your sample is skewed. It may be at the wrong level of detail. You've got to be careful that you don't automatically think you've learned something that isn't true. Or maybe you've learned something that's true but not useful. It's trivial, or because of the time and resources, you can't use it. You know, Netflix gave $1 million prize to a group of people who built a model that improved their recommendation engine. The problem was it took so long to use the model that they never got implemented. They paid the $1 million, but they never used it. Again, I mentioned these trends. Analytics in the cloud. Our software is in the cloud, except for R. Mobile analytics, that's coming. The use of real-time data, especially the Internet of Things. If you're not familiar with the Internet of Things, please go read about it. We're about to put hundreds of billions of sensors into everything. They will all be sending data. Somebody, something has got to analyze that data and make decisions on it. And of course, that leads you to big data. Okay, we're back to the finale. Week 1, make sure you do the readings, and you will receive, again, your instructions to get into decisions first. You might want to make sure you can at least log in. You might want to look at some of the tutorials and documentation, or you might want to wait till next Monday for the walkthrough. So next week we'll feature a demo and walk through the software. By the end of week 3, this is the start of week 1, by the end of week 3, you will have to submit your first assignment, which will be a fully framed decisions first model. And we're back to the finale slide again. So I know this is a long time for you to sit there and listen to me, but there's a lot of material that has to get out there and get us up and running. If you, again, want to ask questions now, this is your opportunity, but feel free to ask them anytime during the week. We have quite a few people here. That's great. But again, all the sessions are recorded and made available for those who aren't able, for whatever reason, to attend live. There's no extra credit for attending live, no penalty for not, and most of the sessions are not live anyway, just the walkthroughs and this first week. So with that, I will pause and say once again, welcome to Data610. I think you'll enjoy the experience. It's a learning experience. There'll be times where you'll say, I wonder what this is about, but I think the fog will lift, and certainly we're here to help you. Myself, the other professors, the TAs, etc., we're all here to provide whatever assistance we can. Your job is to keep up, put in the requisite number of hours, ask questions whenever necessary, and make sure that you understand fully what's going on and what it is you're to do. I don't think the math is a problem for anybody because, again, most of the heavy lifting, if not all of it, is done behind the scenes. It is important to understand what's going on behind the scenes, but you don't actually have to do the tedious calculations yourself. Aha! Somebody says, I'm having issues signing in the Decision First website. Can you assist? Well, I have not sent the sign-in instructions to my class, so I'm sure if you're in my section, you can't sign in because I haven't told you how to do that yet. So be patient. I will try to get the sign-in instructions to everyone in section 9040, my section, by tomorrow. The lady that asked the question, Rose, are you in section 9040? I'll put you on the spot, but that's my section. That was who I thought was here tonight. Oh, no. Then you'll have to ask your question to your faculty, who is, and the TA for your section. And we have we also send, there is a place to send problems specifically. Okay, so Yelena, I think, can help you with this. There is a link to send any real problems. So Yelena says she will help you. She's the TA for the section you're in, Rose. So she'll be glad to help you. There shouldn't be a real problem. I mean, it usually works quite well. You want to make sure you've got the right password. You want to make sure you're putting your email address in exactly the same as the faculty member who entered you into the database, or TA that entered you in the database. So that's the first thing to check. If that's not working, then Mr. Taylor and his support team will quickly step in and make it right. So not to panic on that, but that's good. Anytime you have a problem, you need to ask the question, what happened here? Why isn't it working? So very good. Any other questions tonight? I couldn't possibly have been that clear with everything. I don't think I was. I don't think I was that clear myself, but maybe I was. Okay, well, I know it's been a long night. Thank you very much. Remember, I will, in my section, I will be posting the link, and I'll send it to the other faculty if they want to use it for the session tonight. But I think we're up and running now. As I said, if you're in 9040, I will send you the login instructions for Decisions First by tomorrow. Close the business tomorrow, so you'll have it, and you'll be good to go. All right, no additional questions. I'm going to go ahead and, if I can get up here to the top screen. Stop sharing. And now we're back on the main screen. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorder. I've learned from a painful past that